Hey guys, Stealth here. Today we're watching Zeeshan. It's good old Asgard, and he's going to show us how to do a USSR armored push. Normally on this map you have this usually airborne rush on either Yankee or November, depending on who's taking it first. And similar for the other side, Charlie and Papa. For now, we're going to try to prevent that with the sufficient amount of armor that Zeeshan is going to be putting out. He's also going to get quite some artillery support here from... who's that? Mavionic? Pavlovic, okay. And he's going to keep the zone, so his CV is free to move up. Now he's already designated that his CV is going to move towards this sector, and hopefully we can get another CV to help out in November quickly, capture it and use it as a resupply point, and especially as a reinforcement point to keep up with the pressure on Kilo, and then making your way into Mike and Lima. That's usually how these games play out. Now he's deploying his forces. We have a couple of Tungushkas, of course, because we need that AA. T-80s, T-64BVs, T-72s, and more T-80 BVs. So a nice amount of armor, and that's especially important early on. You want to have a lot of heavy firepower. I found that autocannons generally don't do that much, in the sense that they can be handy if you're dealing with infantry, but initially that's not too likely to happen. He is getting some nice support here from the TY-90s. 5 TY-90s are going to assist. Lots of ATGMs on those helicopters. And with those, it should make his job a bit easier. As well as... sorry, am I really confusing these TY-90s? Sorry, the TY-90s of course are the anti-helicopter solution. I usually confuse these with the HJ-8 firing Z9As. He also has the support of an MIAT with a command infantry already inside. Interestingly, this guy is not making use of any kind of reconnaissance helicopter. So he's basically just dashing his helos forward, hoping that they're not going to get detected or attacked. But at the same time, he doesn't know what they have and where it is. He does know that there is a couple of helicopters pushing forward, potentially carrying one command unit. And if they do find it, then they cannot attack it, because the TY-90 is very nice against helicopters, but doesn't do anything against units such as command infantry. In the meanwhile, we have our armored column moving up, and they are about to run into their first bit of resistance. We have a lot of forces coming in from Pink Zilla over here. Interestingly, however, the toughest unit that I can see so far is the Challenger 1 Mark 1. Well, the Challenger 1 is not a bad tank. It is definitely not up to fighting off this much armor. So the battle is about to kick off in full armored style. What we do have over here from Pink Zilla is a lot of AA. Not just rapiers, but also marksmans, and I believe there are some stormers here as well. So this guy has a significant amount of anti-air, but doesn't really seem to have any sufficient number of ground defense units or ground attack units. So the T-80s really have their pick of the litter here. They can easily kill off anything that they might be able to spot. The spotting is being provided by the T-55s here. And with the command infantry inside, they can now also bring in reinforcements from this zone. He does have some tanks in reserve, T-72s and the T-80Us, as well as the Tunguskas, which are coming up from the stern. And he's spawning in some new infantry, BMP-2s. You want to capture this tree line as fast as possible, making sure that there are no stragglers in there, who could, later on, mount an assault on your position. Now this is where I would be a bit more aggressive with my T-55, because these tanks are fantastic at killing stuff, but you need optics. And while the T-80BV has medium optics, you can see that they're being spotted but not readily identified. And that is something that the TO-50 or the T-55 could do. The TO-55, that's the Napalm one. His command infantry is still moving into cover, that's why they temporarily lost control of the zone. And it seems that we do have some stragglers. A bit of SAS still survived from that initial helicopter landing. But a couple of Chinese tanks very quickly dispatched with them, and they are no longer a threat. And this is of course a 10v10, so it wouldn't be complete if there wasn't a lot of rain coming in. We got a massive amount of cluster artillery being fired off by these batteries of Smirch. And they are just showering the whole area in cluster munitions. If there was any vehicle left, it's going to be either heavily damaged or just completely destroyed at this stage. There's just nothing left. Infantry, of course, is only going to get panicked and will not have taken any kind of damage. Now, with all of these units being, and you can still see some wrecks smoldering here, and Pinkzilla surrenders, no surprise there, he just lost basically all his forces. With these units down or wounded, we can push in with the tanks. But first he's going to do a bit of resupplying, because most of these units took some damage, fired off some of their Cobras, fired off some of their main ammunition, but it doesn't really matter that much. They still have plenty of rounds left for the next engagement. But I'd be worried mostly about keeping these things intact, getting the armor back up to full power. He's also bringing in some more AA units, as well as cleverly positioning a T-55 on the flank, making sure that no one's going to be able to flank this position, because sometimes you do see that happen. You do see a helicopter maneuver coming in from the flank, which is usually very quickly countered, because you can spawn in your own forces here. But in case that they do have some aircraft, we got a quad stack of Pongay 2s. That's a lot of anti-airplane power. They are all active, so I really hope for this guy that there's no seed coming in. Because if there is, he's going to lose potentially 2, depending on the type of seed aircraft. And meanwhile, the ZTZ-85s are pushing forward, doing damage to whatever has actually survived. Look at that. That is your quad stack of AA guns or AA missiles firing, taking out 2 barracks, and instantly wasting half of their ammunition, taking off all of the supplies from the Ural 4320, and with that getting back up to 4, so they can re-engage. But this did give off a big sign saying shoot me here, because it's just so easy to get a seed aircraft here. And if not for seed, then oh, there goes the next missile. If not for seed, then they could of course be using some system of artillery and easily wipe out this quad stack. Pongay, there we go, artillery coming in. Pongay fires again, takes out a Viggen, but they are already taking fire. 2 of the trucks are down, and while they have definitely made their investment back, you would not want to have these in a quad stack. They're just too easily killed off. In the meantime, talking about killing off, Geronimo over here is for some reason pushing forward with his tanks without any kind of reconnaissance, which I find a bit unusual. And it seems that Zeeshan is still not too sure about pushing up with his tanks. At this stage I would probably be pushing mine forward and well, potentially losing them horribly, but he's not doing that just yet. He's basically waiting to see what these ZTC-85s run into, and they are constantly taking ATGM fire. There's another death of the ZTC-85. And without the recon, they can just keep firing ATGMs, and he just cannot do anything at it. So I hope that he's going to bring in some reconnaissance forces in order to help out his tanks, because they're not doing very well. Now, Blue's trying to counter. We got Erwin Rommel coming in. The Monostroke 90 are trying to make back to the tree line. BMP-2 already took a lot of fire. Loads of HGMs coming in, as well as a swarm of rocket pods, and these poor guys just don't stand a chance against that flight of helicopters that's coming in. So one Strela might be a bit challenged in killing off all of these helos, but it's doing a fine job so far. There's 1 kill, next is a miss, and unfortunately he got taken out before he could knock out the Cobra. But we have some other AA already coming in. Tunguska with 8 missiles left, correction, 4 missiles left currently, as well as a couple of HQ-7s. And that flight of helos just did not stand a chance, not against this amount of AA. Now at this point, definitely you want to be moving forward. You have way too much firepower sitting still here, especially expensive firepower. It's okay to keep a tank or 2 back, making sure that you have something to counter an enemy push, but not T-80Us. They're way too valuable. As for this quad stack of infantry and quad stack of BMP-2s, You could have easily covered this with just 2 units of infantry. That would have been enough. Maybe add 1 unit of reconnaissance infantry, park it there, and you have a good lookout over the field. Freeing up the other 2 transports to start pushing along this position. Because he is making his way to the other side of the next zone, but he does not have any infantry. So if these tanks do come up against some sort of infantry, they're going to take heavy damage. And that's why I usually prefer to have my infantry backed up by tanks, instead of just sending tanks through and hoping for the best. And this is part of the problem that he's going to be facing next. The Lahatut Mepats has a very, very good anti-tank capability, but the Tunguska is already on it, and there we go. There's 1 kill. Unless they both... No, actually, yeah, that's 1 kill. He's down. A couple of bombers coming in. We got an A-32A Lansen, Napalm bomber, and a Viggen, who seems to be trying to take out some heavy, potentially the T-80 BV, but instead they hit something else. They hit a Tor, making it a bit easier for further air operations, but not if you have this amount of aircraft patrolling the skies. Geronimo comes in with 3 Fibaus, taking out majority of the enemy AA net, but look at the amount that they have. Several Pivats, Shenavs. I think I saw... What was that? Hawk 3. We got some tanks coming up. And by now the T-64 BVs have taken quite a bit of damage. They need to be retreated if they want to live. There's more Israeli forces that are being pushed forward by Philippe 247. And this tank can really not take another hit, so they need to take it out right now or reverse the tank. There we go. T-80 BV saving the rest of the group. Again, keep your other tanks with you. They're no good there. Same for the Mi-2. Would be a fantastic asset on the front line because he just does not have a lot of reconnaissance. Now, in case you're wondering why I'm casting this replay with mistakes like these being made, I find it important that every now and then I cast replays of less experienced players to make sure that we can see what they could improve, and potentially that could be a bit of a wake-up call for you as well, thinking, oh right, yeah, I need to just quickly check the back of my lines and see what other units I could be bringing in. Talking about bringing in, Erwin Rommel has not learned his lesson, AA-wise, and he's bringing in an Aardvark, seemingly doing a pretty random drop on this area, barely scratching the HQ-7s. They took some damage, but they're still alive. And he was maybe hoping that there were quite a few tanks there, but other than that, I don't really see what the strategic value of that attack was. Now we got a massive smoke cloud coming up here from the napalm that was launched against the spawn line here. This should slow down the spawns from Michael for a while. The question is, can they get here fast enough to capitalize on that? You really want to be quick about moving into this zone if you have an attack like this going on. Because with that, the enemy units that are going to be spawning, coming out of this tunnel, are going to be either panicked or taking some damage, and preferably both. But the fire seems to already be dying out, meaning that the smoke's going to dissipate and that the units can perfectly see what's going to happen next. Wounded T-64 BVs being resupplied by an Mi-6. I still find these pretty impressive helicopters. They're just so immensely large. But with 3,700 supplies, you'd be surprised how fast tanks can chew through that amount of supply. Once again, his reconnaissance is lacking. I'm just gonna come out and say it, it's lacking. He does not have a good idea what is going on the front line. He's basically scouting with 40 mod Strelky. Now, having a quad stack is always very, very vulnerable to bombers. And we do know that the enemy is using napalm bombers every now and then. So this makes it even less of a good idea to start pushing with 40 mod Strelky. If you want to push with a squad size, I would recommend groups of 20 at the most. Because with that you can always have mutually supporting fire, capturing multiple structures, and you don't all get panicked or stunned when one group gets attacked. Blue is trying to put up a desperate defense here. We got an Ontos coming in. I think these were Ontoses as well. We got an LV-25 Scout. And they are putting up seemingly a bit of AA defense. We got a Chaparral here. We got Correction, we got 3 Chaparrals here. A couple of Bradleys coming in. And these Motostrelki are now in contact with the enemy, but they are not in range. They are just waiting for some of these Bradleys to come close enough for them to use their RPGs. But it's not happening. And just note how fast these guys are taking damage. If this would have been just a squad of 20, then it wouldn't have been that much of a big deal. You would have just sent one group of 20 forward, and the other one would have been staying behind here. So that if the enemy does decide to push on your position, you always have a bit of a surprise for them ready to go. Now Bradleys do come with the tow missile, but at this point they are all panicked. So if he can now push on them with his tanks, they are easy pickings. If you give them the opportunity to start pushing back, and to especially kill off all of your infantry with their autocannons, then you're in a bit of a less favorable position. But bloody hell, does blue have a lot of forces here. Artillery is coming in again, definitely hitting the friendlies as well. Motostrelki 90 are probably getting pretty panicked. Not only from the fact that they're taking fire from no less than 8 Bradleys, but also from the fact that there's friendly fire involved. And especially this amount of firepower should allow Zeeshan to move up. He has no excuse sitting back here. And he really needs to push up, kill off anything that's left, and try to push directly towards the command vehicle that's capturing Michael to make sure that the enemy can no longer bring in units. And once again, with the lack of reconnaissance, he can every now and then see these units coming out, but it's still not enough. T-64 BVs trying to push to the other side, where we do have an actual tank and 1 Abrams, as opposed to mostly fire support vehicles and Bradleys. We got IKV 103s, but this guy could be a problem. The Israeli Perret has the Spike missile. That thing does a significant amount of damage. It does 27 points of armor penetration or armor piercing, and with that can pretty easily slice through the frontal armor of a T-80 BV, do either tremendous damage or just kill it outright. So that is one that has to go, and unfortunately he does not have line of sight on it anymore because he doesn't have any optics. The only recon that they have is being provided by Geronimo here, and it is not in a very favorable position, as this position would have been way better than just turning off the weapon systems. T-64 BVs are not being concealed by the tree line here, they are in fact being detected, meaning that at any point an ATGM plane or helicopter could come in and easily wipe them out. It looks like in the meanwhile he's also engaged on this end, as I saw some blue blips in this tree line. Not exactly sure what happened there, but he definitely lost some units. And this is exactly what I was worried about. T-64 BVs taking fire from the helicopters. They're easily getting countered by the HQ-7s, trying to back off. But fortunately, the T-64s didn't take that much damage. They only took one little bit of damage, because the tow missile doesn't really have the punch to go through a lot of armor for the T-64. Now, he's now pushing forward with even more Motostrelki, and he has a further 20 standing by here. He really should have been pushing forward here. He really had the advantage, especially with the artillery that rained death on this position. And they are now trying to get the units that have been killed off back here as soon as possible. Seemingly bringing in more reinforcements infantry-wise. But turns out that these are HGM vehicles. They know that Red has a lot of tanks here. And they know that Zeeshan has a pretty good position on this ridge. But fortunately, the Russian tanks have an HGM range that is as good and sometimes even better than the HGMs mounted on these PVRBVs 551s. Over on the right area here we still have, I believe, yep, there's still Bradleys here. Fortunately, they're not actually in a position to support the riflemen that are here, but they could easily be moving up and putting a lot of suppressive fire on the Motostrelki 90 here. In the meanwhile, there's the Perret again. It is currently not firing, but could easily be taking out tanks. Fortunately, it seems to be blocked by that line of sight area over here. And there is the MiG-27K that takes it out. Another massive napalm attack launched on Michael here. And really, Zeeshan, you gotta be pushing right bloody now. You have all the opportunity in the world. Motostrelkis are pushing forward. At least, there we go. Looks like they could be ambushing the Bradleys. Bradleys have absolutely no business being here. And in the meanwhile, they're also seemingly trying to get a flank position on Leonid, which Erwin Rommel has already countered with a couple of fire support vehicles as well as an Ontos or two. And of course there's the anti-tank solution. They also have a Rise pattern over there. Not the best of tanks, but it is something that you need to be afraid of if you have, for example, the T-55. T-55 against a Rise pattern, I wouldn't try it. You do have a lot less armor than that tank has penetration power. Now, the enemy is still holding their helicopters in reserve. They are pretty nicely grouped up. Zeeshan has marked them for attack. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see some sort of artillery raining down on them, as this is what happens in a 10v10. Artillery comes in. So let's see if there's anyone already on the ball here. We've got a couple of Smirches that are more or less firing in the right position, but they are still reloading. So it could be a while before we're going to see that meteor shower come in and wipe out the helicopters. In the meanwhile, Zeeshan has once again neglected to push forward, and once again is just basically giving his advantage away to the enemy. And surely he's gaining a lot of points by killing off random units that keep being spawned in. But he could have been in Michael at this point. He could have been easily inside Michael and just starting to either neutralize the zone with a CV of his own, or just neutralizing the zone altogether, taking it for his own faction and then pushing into Leonid. Because that's really where you want to go. You want to neutralize that plane spawn in Leonid. And here is the anti-helicopter solution. We have a lot of dead Cobras here. This is what happens if you have your helicopters spotted and you have them too close together. They just get wiped out. T-64 BVs pushing forward, as well as a couple of ZSD 90s from Geronimo. Once again, he does not have a lot of reconnaissance. Only Lee Ren's here. Wargamer has left the game. That is one of blue. And he is pushing forward, trying to capture the terrain. I think he's taken out most of the fire support vehicles that we've seen in this tree line. Nope, there's still an LIV-25. And there's the Patton. The Patton, unfortunately, was angling towards the Lee Ren and got completely shot in the side or even the rear by the T-64s. T-72s taking out another tank, and over towards the right we have further Pattons being killed off. He's pushing forward with Resvetkas as well, trying to keep an eye on whatever happens to come up against this ridgeline. Because once again, if you capture this ridgeline, you have a dominating position, same as you have over here. It is really difficult to mount an assault on this ridgeline, unless you're using a lot of aircraft, a lot of smoke, and basically a lot of overwhelming firepower. In the meanwhile, the Bradleys are still there. We have another attack coming in, napalm strike on the town. Not sure if it's any good, not sure if it was coordinated. Geronimo is firing a lot of weaponry there. He has scored 1345 points, but after the initial artillery strike, it seems like they're not pushing through. Initially, the artillery gives you a big advantage. It stuns units, panics them, wounds them, but if you don't push through, then you're just wasting that opportunity. As I was taking a bit of water there, we have another couple of tanks being brought forward. 8 M1s are coming in. Now the T-64 BVs are good tanks, but are they good enough to hold off the slaughter from 8 M1s? And the answer seems to be yes. They have 17 frontal armor against the gun of the M1 that only does 13 damage. So, and especially if you start moving them sideways into cover, they are even easier targets. So that was basically a giveaway of 8 M1 Abrams. And there's another kill. And with that, Zeeshan has already gained almost 4,000 points here. I believe he's doing quite well, but he could have done a lot better if he was pushing forward here. Making his way into Michael, and then killing off anything that happens to come in from the spawn up close, instead of making sure that it's basically dying from afar. And you could argue that this is in fact a strategy, just putting up a defensive line. Making sure that you just score points on anything that comes close. And there is something to be said for that. It's a tactic that is sometimes used in 10v10s. But it is not gaining you any terrain. It is not gaining you any ground. And with that, it's not actually starting to win you the match. It is destruction, I'll give you that. And they've already scored 12,000 points more than the enemy. So they're doing very well in that regard. But I just always try to push for terrain. Maybe I've been doing too much conquest, but I usually try to go for terrain because I can always fall back to my previous position. Instead of, if he has to fall back now, it has to be this tree line and this tree line next, and Nicholas. Anyways, the push on the right side is doing rather well. We have ZTZ 85 2As pushing forward, but there is a lot of ATGM wielding material here. LEVATs, Merkava 3. I also saw a P10 circling around. There it is. Tunguska should be making short work of that P10. It's taken a big hit. Tunguska down to its last missile. And there we go, 130 points. P10 is down. Making life for the tanks here a bit safer. But you're now pushing directly into a blue 4 spawn zone. And if they start to spawn in a triple stack of Merkava 3Bs, as well as BAS, M8 AGS, and LEVATs, then you're basically shit out of luck. They don't have anything to defend them against that. And to make matters worse, there's a duo of M1A1s coming in. At this point, they don't have a lot of defense here. What? The tank is going to miraculously survive here? Wow, that is extremely lucky. I really thought that this thing was just gone. His buddy tank is definitely out, but for now, he's actually made it into cover. And once again, we have an artillery shitstorm coming in from red. And this is moderately effective at damaging these tanks. I'm saying moderately because the Merkava 3Bs, which are the real target here, have not taken a lot of damage. But look at the size of the area here. That is just completely, well, absolved in cluster artillery. M1A1's not doing too well. The Merkavas are still a big threat there. They've not taken a lot of damage, and with that full health tank against a T-72, well, I wouldn't want to try it. Does he still have the T-80s back here? No, but he is pushing forward with some more super heavies, T-72 BUs, and it seems that Max is trying to resupply the units that Geronimo has here. He's coming in with a fleet of Mi-26s. This is basically a flying fob you have here. Because with this is 4,500 supplies, this is 7,000 total, 9.5. Wow, this guy has well over 13,000 points of supplies here, and he's just resupplying everything he possibly can. Now Geronimo's asking for help. Not exactly too sure why, because he only has 2 tanks. I'd say that Zeeshan is the guy who's most at risk at this position. But apparently they are so far staving off the attack from the reds. From the blues. And surprisingly, 2 MiG-27Ks are not capable of killing off a Merkava 3D. It just has that much armor. Over here he still has all of this firepower. Now, if you are indeed going to do a dedicated push towards this area, then you could try pulling some tanks off of the line here. Especially the T-64 BVs. If they're not being used, then you can just pull them off the line, and so long as the enemy thinks that they're still there, you can fool them into thinking that you have way more firepower than you actually have. It is a bit of a risk, it's a bit of a gamble, but if it pays off, then you're defending an area basically with 2 or 3 tanks, which in Wargame happens all the time. Now Rommel is definitely not clear to let go of this area yet. Still, a lot of Motostrelki are being punished by M13s or M113s. We have an Abrams. We still have some triple Bradleys over there. But fortunately they are making progress on the left against Darkwing. This is Pavlovich, who's pushing forward and seemingly running into... I'd say that these are militia transports. Not exactly sure where the militia is. They may have already been taken out. There we go, there's another kill on the transport, but where is the actual infantry? Now this is getting a bit risky, because what Zeeshan is doing here is spreading himself out. He has a couple of pretty pricey elements on the right, the T-72 BUs. He has a couple of pretty pricey elements on the left, T-80Us, Tunguska. He has a defensive line over here towards the middle. But even if I zoom out, I can barely see what's going on in the entire area, let alone try to identify the units quickly. And this means that you're going to be less effective at micromanaging your units, especially if you have just smaller sections and not enough to mount a full-flown push or full-fledged push on any actual position there. Over on the right, it seems that Blue is a bit nervous about taking airstrikes or helicopter rushes. We got Macbeths here, Pip 3s, LAV scouts are moving forward to just scout out the position. Immediately getting hammered by artillery, which just happened to be landing there. Bad place, bad time for the LAV 25 there. Now Geronimo is very aggressively pushing forward with 40 loose Andui. Not exactly sure why you'd want to have a quad stack in this tree line. Maybe they're a remnant from a previous assault, but in a situation like this, they are massively out of position. The only option that they have is either to move forward through the open terrain, which is not where you want your infantry to be, or back, where they're going to have to be picked up by transports. Potentially these ZSD 90s. But with this quad stack here, he is risking a lot of points. That's 100 points sending by there, easily killable with one airstrike. Another massive artillery strike is trying to hammer Blue Force positions. And over on the left, they are still trying to make way into Michael. We now have multiple tanks trying to push on that position, killing off tanks left, right and center, killing off transports wherever he can spot them, and he's gaining a lot of points. They are making some progress, but still not enough. What's being brought in now? More IKVs? Really? You don't have tanks? Not exactly sure what's going on here, but Darkwing is sending out a lot of very, very cheap fire support vehicles. These things do have heat rounds, so whatever they're firing at, they're always going to be doing some damage, even if they cannot actually penetrate the armor. But it is not a very effective unit, as it can be one-shot by basically any tank. Now T-80Us have been repaired by the Mi-6. T-72s still need some repairs, and I don't think that the Mi-6 has enough supplies on board there. And with all the fire support that he's also getting from Pavlovich with the T-80UMs and the T-80BVs, they should easily be making way into Michael very, very soon. The right attack has once again stalled, and while the artillery has once again put large areas of the map just into a massive moon landscape, it doesn't really do anything. Because while they have this town up in flames, they don't actually push forward. And this is once again the perfect opportunity to wipe out infantry that is still left there. Which by this stage is going to be getting resupplied already by the FOB. So at this point you're actually already too late. Guska pushing forward, trying to get the kill on the Kiowa warrior. And missile goes in. There's the Kiowa warrior down. That is a very, very good optical unit for Blue 4. And I'm glad it's gone. Got some more artillery coming in. LAV ATs. One got, or actually potentially both already got killed off by the tanks here. And Geronimo is once again pushing forward with a couple of ZTZ-85-2s. Going up directly against a triple threat of Merkava 3Bs, which don't hesitate for a second, wiping out tank after tank, using both main guns and HEGMs. and the Chinese are forced to retreat, losing quite a few tanks in the process. Now Philippe has a very, very tedious position here. It is a tree line, or a ridge line, or just a little bit of cover. He does have a fleet of Oshkoshers to keep repairing and resupplying these tanks, but they basically have nowhere to go. New artillery is coming in, stunning one of the tanks, meaning that it is going to be taking some damage, but I still don't see how Red is going to take those things out anytime soon. Maybe the T-72 BU with the sphere can at long range inflict some damage against these guys, because they are 3Bs, they don't have HGMs. HGM was fired from the Perret, so I got that one wrong. Once again, cluster artillery strikes the position, panics the tanks, damages them quite significantly at this time. But once again, I'm not seeing a follow-up. Just a triple unit of ZTC 85-3s. It's not going to win it. So Zeeshan, in your description you asked for commentary and for especially recommendations. The recommendation is to push forward when you see units like this taking heavy damage. When a unit is panicked, it is far less accurate. You can see that the last tank has an accuracy of 40%, right above the main gun. That accuracy used to be 65%. So that means that if you push forward with your T-72 BUs at this point, you can easily wipe out the Merkavas. But I think that Zeeshan might be otherwise engaged. And he's actually pushing forward into Michael, under cover of Pavlovich. But it doesn't look like they actually brought a command vehicle. What I usually have in my armored decks is a command tank, so that when I have my tanks pushing forward, I can have a command tank neutralizing or even capturing an enemy zone. And that is some unit that he doesn't quite have yet. Over on the right, it seems that all the Motostrelki have once again disappeared, so there is still quite a bit of infantry inside this zone. But he's also bringing in new reinforcements. BMP-2's coming in. Look at that. This is the view from the BMP-2. One massive smoke screen with no idea what's on the other side of it. We just know that they need to get there, drop off the infantry, but they are just running into stingers. And not just stingers, unfortunately. Also, whoa. We have 80 riflemen, 120 riflemen, 160 riflemen from Rommel, as well as a whole load of stingers. That might be a bit too much for the Motostrelki to handle. Fortunately, they have a lot of fire support, but with the smoke screen, it's making it difficult to actually use those fire support units effectively. It seems that they still don't quite know where the command unit is, although this could very well be it. One lonely Humvee, unless it's a Hamer. Where is their command unit? We've got artillery coming in from Max QCG. We're going to need a lot of it. Look at that rocket pod fire. That is a fleet of Mi-24Ps coming in from Grosselure. Just look at this. You may hate 10v10s, and at which point you're probably no longer watching the video anyway, but stuff like this, I find this just a very impressive sight. Just a whole armada of helicopters pushing forward, wasting missiles left, right and center, and trying to kill off anything that the other units haven't already killed off. And look at that, there's even further artillery coming in. They are definitely wasting this entire town. And surprise, surprise, the Motostrelki have actually survived the entire onslaught. All of the riflemen are dead. And surprisingly, despite all the artillery, all the rocket pods, all the fire support that was being poured in, 3 Motostrelki have actually survived that engagement. So these guys definitely have something to tell their grandchildren. Now, the helicopters are pushing around the town, not waiting around and trying to get the kill. They got the kill on the command vehicle. So now it's a question, how fast can you bring in your own command? Which is coming in. It's just going to take a while. And we still have some IKVs and some STRV 103D just trying to defend whatever's left, but without any kind of reinforcement and completely surrounded. Look at the enter zone of the spawn here. This guy just has no choice whatsoever. So Red has scored 38,000 points versus 20,000 on Blue. They have control over majority of the right top side of the map. The left side of the map currently does not see a lot of action. I'm not seeing any large pushes on this area at the moment. But it seems like they might be doing a push of their own with a couple of Mi-8Ts, or correction, Mi-8s. But let's continue to watch here. Because Maksui is pushing forward with another group of Israeli tanks directly into a bunch of ZSD-90s, which they should easily wipe out. T-72BUs at this range could be a problem for the T-72BUs. They can basically one-shot these guys, but there might be too many of them. Unfortunately for Maksui, he's not actually using these guys all at the same location, but he has 2 going down the ridge and 3 coming up the ridge, very easily wiped out by the T-72s. Another artillery strike is coming in. We have no less than 10 PHL-81s. These are the cluster munition types. And once again, trying to put everything... correction. We are looking at the cluster munition type, right? Yeah, they are clustered. But I'm seeing some napalm going in as well. Ah, that's these guys. PHZ-70s. So a lot of firepower is being put into that area. Yeah, that's exactly what I was expecting. There's nothing there. You could argue there's nothing there anymore. But there's just nothing there that he should have even fired at. That is such a massive waste of firepower. Such a massive waste of supplies. And this is the guy who is usually one of the 10v10 players who drains all the fobs. There, 1 empty fob, 2, 3... I'm not saying it's just him. I mean, we have plenty of rocket artillery going around, but... please make sure that there is actually something to fire at if you are using that much artillery. Because that attack was just a waste of, I'd say, 4,000 to 8,000 points of supplies, depending on how many units were actually involved. Now, with just 3 minutes left in the game, I think that we have a massive advantage for Red. They're going to be getting to that 45,000 points. They're also trying to make a headway into the middle of the map. We got Motostroki 90, BMP-2s and a Snezka trying to push forward. Looks like Maksui and Philippe 247 have their hands full. And they're just getting hammered all over the place. However, they do still have Paul, and this is where Luck is operating. Seemingly completely on his own. Although Philippe 247 also has some units over there. So I think that Philippe is very heavily spread out, not actually controlling any of his units to a great extent. BMPTs, look at that, BMPTs, BMD3s, lots of VDVs, motor shoots, and blue is never coming back into this zone. It's just not going to happen. Over on the right, it looks like we have a push of Geronimo using ZTZ-63-2s, the Bastion missile and the PLA-105. Not the best unit, but for 45 points, especially if you swarm them, they can be moderately effective. And especially if you have this many units firing ATGMs, that can really mess up these tanks. If you don't lose sight of them, that's when all these ATGMs just fly off harmlessly. Once again, I don't see a lot of reconnaissance here, if any. I'm seeing one Rozvedka's unit, and that's it. So Geronimo is trying to push forward, despite having a complete lack of reconnaissance here. It looks like he's just trying to waste as many units as possible, and just trying to swarm his way into the last spawn zone here. Or well, the last, I mean they also have Fedor, but Leonid is the goal here. Now at this point, most of the tanks have already wasted all of their ATGMs. And that is when the enemy ATGMs are starting to open up. Easily wiping out these units as they don't have a lot of armor. 3 points of armor, meaning that any ATGM, which is even moderately effective, is going to easily one-shot this tank. And look at that. These Chinese just don't stand a chance against the ATGMs that are coming in from the 551s here. I gotta give Darkwing credit here. I believe he scored most points on the enemy team. Yep, 5,500. And he's just not giving up. He is sticking it out all the way to the end and just continuing to put fire into anything that he thinks is worth killing off. T-72 BUs also pushing forward with their HEGMs, trying to kill off some of the enemy HEGM units. And just look at the speed of the sphere. That's something that I really appreciate about that missile. They're just so fast. And with that, less likely to miss. This time around, coming in with the main gun, killing off any tanks that are being brought forward. Once again, this time by Felipe 247. 7 Merkava 1s, a couple of Magach 7 Gemels, and once again, a Super Heavy. That could be a bit more of a problem, if it's still going to matter in 12 seconds, which is not too likely. Mi-24Ps coming in, damaging once again everything that they can see, which, with a complete lack of reconnaissance, is not that much. Anyway, that was the game. Let's have a look at Zeeshan. 7,200 points gained, almost 7,300 points. He only lost 1,500. Now, that is very, very well played, meaning he kept his units alive very well. But I think that he could have been a lot more effective had he just been pushing forward into Michael a lot earlier. Make sure you have reconnaissance, make sure you have, if you see the enemy taking artillery fire, the advantage, and that you take that advantage to just continue to push into a zone and neutralize anything that might still be standing. Because that, in my opinion, is what armor does. It just pushes forward, wipes out enemy units, and basically opens up the way for motorized and mechanized support decks. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on the game. I know it's a 10v10, I know that they can be spammy, but every now and then I want to have a game up here that we can all learn from and that we can help out the newer players with. So give them a break, don't go too hard on them, just help them out wherever you can. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more Wargame Red Dragon.